Hello, distrowatch.com is one of the most important websites for Linux. In here we have a large list of Linux operating systems, also called Linux distributions. They're grouped by a top, last 6 months or last 7 days. The numbers and the order is not that relevant. Apart from that, you have the list of the latest releases. Once a new Linux operating system release appears, you will have it in here in the body of the page. And also important, apart from the list of latest Linux operating system releases, you have the latest open source software releases. So these are usually release tarballs, files with extension .tar.gz or tar. Let's look at this tar.xz and the homepage of the project that just did the release. So this is apt part of Debian, and this is the homepage for the apt package manager from Debian. Apache Tomcat is a Java server that runs part of an HTTP server, so an application server. Samba is a Windows shares, Windows remote registry, Windows remote server control manager, Windows remote printing server and client. Firefox, a web browser. Snapd, a technology to package software for more than one Linux operating system at a time. This is a graphical user interface desktop. This is the Linux kernel, latest release 6.7.5 with source code tarball. Qt Creator 13 was released, which is a C++ integrated development environment from the Qt framework. Okay, so that's the list of latest Linux operating system releases, the list of latest open source package releases, and also interesting, and I used to use this thing a lot, is the list of latest audio podcasts. The Linux Link Tech Show in a version OGG file or MP3 file. For instance, when you're working and you need a bit of company, you can let one of these audio files play while you're doing your thing. Let's now look at the list of Linux operating systems and see a bit of their history and how they're related, how they're grouped into large main Linux operating system families. So there's a list in here, sorted alphabetically. Some of these Linux operating systems are no longer developed. Some of these operating systems were the labor of one person plus help from the larger community. So a one-man show. Some of these Linux operating systems want to be very specialized, just for music creators, just for audiophiles, just for the classroom, etc. Just to be used as a Linux Live CD. And over time, more and more Linux operating system has been added to DistroWatch. DistroWatch does a bit of monitoring the websites automatically in order to determine when new Linux operating systems are released and what are the package versions that are used by various Linux operating systems. The list increases, and the list also contains operating systems which are not Linux. Haiku is an open source re-implementation of the BOS operating system. GhostBSD is a FreeBSD downstream. What else? There's the BSDs in here, Berkeley Software Distributions, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD. There are the SunOS, Solaris, IllumOS operating systems. There's the Linux operating systems that are GNU plus Linux style, and those which shy away from GNU and try to use Muscle or the BSD Userland or BusyBox. We have Solaris here in the SunOS Solaris family. Now let's look at the list of operating systems, so not only Linux. This is the table that we can start from. This is their ranking for the last 6 months, which means how often did people go to these pages. There's one page for each operating system. For instance, this is the web page for elementary. distrowash.com/table distribution equals elementary. Let's see what it says about each operating system. So past news, the home page, there's screenshots, and the table. The table is for all of the public releases, the release name, if there's a human readable text version of that name, and then the release date. There's links to ISOs if possible, not really. And then this table is similar for all of the other operating systems. It says what package management format it uses, Deb in this case, the init software if it's systemd or not. File systems, this list is always the same because in Linux you build most Linux file systems that are available upstream in the Linux kernel. They're available at least in the init-ramd or as a Linux kernel module. There's a package list, and then for each of the most important software, the latest version that's available. So let's see, for instance, for Bash, which is the GNU Born Again shell, the command line shell that I use, has this home site. This is homepage. This is the latest public release 5.2.21, and this is version 5.1 contained in elementary 7.1 Horus. And as we go back in time, in elementary OS 5.0 Juno, there was Bash 4.4.18. So we can see, first of all, if the latest release of the operating system has the latest version of the packages available, or how old they are. And then, for historical reasons, maybe you want to install the latest version of I don't know, Mandrake Linux that had Qt version 2 available. You would go to the table for Mandrake and search in the Qt row, which is this one, for the biggest number which starts with a 2 dot. Now let's look a bit over most of the Linux operating systems that are still in use. MX Linux I have never used. I'm not sure what this thing is. It's first on the top. No. So says it's in the Debian family. There's a full package list. apt, kde. This is the full package list in the either in the ISO or in the remote package repositories. But there's tens of thousands in here, so it's probably the repository, not the installer ISO. Okay. So that's number one on the top. Mint was an alternative to Ubuntu, also has a downstream of Debian. So there's Linux Mint Debian edition and Linux Mint Ubuntu edition. There's versions for different operating systems, Cinnamon, Mate, XFC. There used to be a KDE version, LMDE version. Okay, so uses Deb because it's in the Debian family of Linux operating systems. I have never used. Endeavour OS. There are four big Linux OS families. There's Debian with Ubuntu, there's Arch, there's Fedora, and then there's openSUSE. This is Endeavour OS is in the family Arch. Arch is a rolling release, so you do not really need to do a dist upgrade or reinstall the system if you don't want to. You just keep installing packages as they come. You'll always be up to date if you keep installing the latest packages. Like if you install the available packages every 2 days, you will always be up to date, barring any issues which will make your computer unbootable, where you need to actually fix your system to make it bootable again or something. Okay. Similar to the Debian family, there's thousands of packages in here. There's tens of desktop environments and Windows managers available. Endeavour OS has a nice installer, so it has an ISO file, and the installer is Calamares. You can, for instance, install a pure Arch Linux plus KDE Plasma version 5 using the Endeavour OS installer ISO. Would recommend this operating system. I would recommend it. Debian. Tens of thousands of packages. Extension deb. A source code tarball release is usually split in more packages, like a -dev package, a lib package, whatever. If you want to install enough packages such that you can compile C++ software, you will need to install a large number, thousands of deb packages with name ending in -dev. Okay, and in here the table is really useful because they have many versions still supported or versions that will not be released this year. So the latest major version is 12 Bookworm 2023 June. Okay, and Traditionally, there were many years between releases in Debian. So in this case, between 8.0 and 9.0, there's 2 years. In here, there were 3 years, etc. So I can see 2 years here, 2 here, 2 here. So the cadence is one release per 2 years, per 24 months. But they released when it's ready. And besides the fact that it's the largest Linux operating system family, the Debian one, has a ton of deb packages available out of the box. The deb packages installed really correctly. You can install and uninstall them. They will not conflict with each other. Your system is always going to be clean and pristine if you just install deb packages from the repositories that are pre-configured in your Debian Linux operating system without you adding additional repositories. And there's a web page for that. Don't Break Debian, it's the name of the page, is a wiki page which says that you should not install deb packages from random repositories, random deb packages that you have installed yourself, that you have downloaded or built yourself. If you want to install custom software, then install it in your home directory. Put it in ~/.opt or in ~/.local or in ~/bin or /.bin. Don't mess with /usr, which is only for your Linux operating system to install packages to, even in /usr/local. As much as possible, do not install anything into /usr that's not from the using the official binary package format from your Linux operating system. Snap and Flatpak do their own things. For installing app images, you should probably use the ~applications directory. So the applications directory in your home directory. Don't install from random websites, and don't combine the various strains of Debian. So Debian testing plus unstable, Ubuntu plus Debian, Debian plus Mint, etc. Okay, and it's also a community project. Debian has their own infrastructure, their own resources. They're not that dependent on corporations, and they have their own laws. So in case all of the corporations that support Linux would disappear, Debian would survive, and Arch also. Okay, Manjaro in the Arch family, similar to Endeavour OS. Release model rolling similar to Arch. Pacman, the package manager from Arch. Okay, Ubuntu, the most important child of Debian, is a subfamily of Linux operating systems in the Linux operating system family of Debian. Uses the deb format, uses the same deb packages as Debian. It is a downstream of Debian, synchronizes deb packages from Debian regularly. Releases each 6 months, and the releases that happen in 2024-04, 2204, so each 2 years, in even years, in the month of April, are long-term support releases. You can see the LTS in the version, so it's 2020 22.04 LTS, 20.04 LTS, etc. So it's Debian plus something more. There's tens of full-time employees that are improving the packages that come from Debian and putting them into Ubuntu, and also contributing upstream in Debian. They're testing Linux kernels more. They have, I know, a bit better Linux kernels than Debian. They have hardware enablement, new kernels available for a release that happened 2 years ago, for instance. They have different graphical user interface installer ISO technology, formerly called, it was Ubiquity and Subiquity. I'm not sure what's going to come next. The one written in Flutter, probably. Whereas the installer in Debian used to be text user interface mode, and now it's graphical user interface mode based on Debian installer, etc. So different technologies for the ISO installer in Ubuntu and Debian. The default installer in Debian is just one ISO that only comes with a selection of packages, which is the GNOME Shell Desktop plus some packages, and then the rest of the packages you can install after you finish installing the Ubuntu operating system. And then there's various other distributions or spins, different ISOs that install just one desktop environment. For instance, KDE Plasma 5, the name of that Linux operating system is Ubuntu. Many of the Linux operating systems from this table will just be a ISO with a different selection of deb packages on it from Ubuntu. Fedora, this is one of the 4 big Linux operating system families. This is the upstream for Red Hat Linux Enterprise, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHEL. RHEL is the Linux operating system that has the biggest revenue from actual paying customers. Fedora uses the package management format RPM, and on top of it, DNF. So the file extension is RPM, and the package manager that makes sure that the RPMs are downloaded from the correct place, installed in the correct order, uninstalled in the correct order, etc. is DNF. Here is the table. They have, I don't know, 2 releases per year, from what I can see. In autumn, fall, and in spring. Also, similar to Ubuntu, they have just one ISO with just one desktop environment on it, GNOME, and then there's different spins for other that contain an ISO with just one desktop environment or just one window manager, different from GNOME. There's the Fedora KD spin, etc. Okay, it is one of the first Linux operating systems to provide the latest and greatest versions of software. They were the new versions of the GCC GNU C compiler suite when they get a public release. In a very short time, a package will be RPM package will be made available for Fedora and will be available in the next public release of Fedora. So sometimes by using the latest Fedora, you encounter issues that you cannot encounter with other Linux operating systems that use older versions of the GCC C++ compiler or the CLang C++ compiler, as an example. But they're trailblazing, and issues that can be encountered in the latest and greatest version of Fedora are being fixed really fast in the upstream project where the issue lies in. Pop! OS is the Linux operating system of a hardware vendor and is based on Ubuntu and GNOME. So it's in the Ubuntu Linux operating system family. Deb apt. Zorin says Ubuntu here. Says Deb here. I'm not sure what it is. I have never used it. openSUSE is one of the 4 major Linux OS operating systems families. This is the base of the Linux operating system SLES, SUSE Linux Enterprise software. Enterprise. SLE, SUSE Linux Enterprise, is a Linux operating system that has revenue from actually selling support and this Linux operating system SLE. And openSUSE is an upstream to SLE, similar to how Fedora is an upstream to RHEL. There are full-time employees of SUSE working on openSUSE. The packaging format is RPM, the extension is RPM for the binary packages, and on top of it you use the package manager zipper. There's releases, and then there's Tumbleweed, which is a rolling release version of openSUSE similar to how Arch is rolling, the Arch Linux. Next up, Nobara. Let's see what this thing is. Says based on Fedora. Fedora with user-friendly fixes. Wine dependencies, OBS Studio, third-party codec packages for GStreamer, NVIDIA drivers, some package fixes. So Fedora, because Red Hat does not want Fedora to contain RPM packages that use patented technologies such as audio-video encoding, encoders, decoders. Fedora does not have RPM packages for these encumbered technologies. That's why The alternative is, after you install Fedora, to add an additional package repository which will offer those RPM packages which are encumbered. And probably Nobara offers some of those packages in their installation ISO, I'm guessing. Next up, Garuda. Garuda says based on Arch, rolling release, of course, ISO installer Calamares. So similar to EndeavourOS. In the Arch Linux family. Next up, NTX. Against X11. Fast, lightweight, and easy to use live CD based on Debian stable. Pentium 3. 256 megabyte RAM recommended minimum for NTX. I'm not sure what these things mean. Let's see what it means. So ICE WM, which is a window manager, one of the simpler ones and Windows 95 like ones. The packaging format is deb. I'm not sure why a specialist Linux operating system that's made for Pentium 3s would be in top 13 most used Linux distributions. So again, take the ranking with, or ignore the ranking and ignore the hits per day and ignore the order. KDE Neon. So KDE Neon uses Ubuntu 22.04, which is the newest long-term support public release of Ubuntu, plus the updated deb packages for Qt 6 and built from source release tarballs, Qt 6, Qt 5 latest versions, and the KDE software, KDE frameworks 5 and 6, KDE Plasma 5 and 6, etc. So once the release of a source code tarball release from the KDE community or from Qt appears, that gets packaged as deb files and makes its way into this Linux operating system, which is called KDE Neon with a lowercase n. Okay, so it's semi-rolling. The base, the deb packages that are not Qt or KDE are somewhat older. If you can build the Qt and the KDE software with them. If not, even some of those packages get updated to new releases. And then Qt and KDE software is up to date. Once the release is being done, a deb package is being built and used in KDE Neon deb remote repositories, package repositories. Okay. There's more than one version. Download now. There's editions. User is what 99% of the users of KDE Neon use. And then for KDE contributors, people that want to test the latest and greatest source code release from KDE or want to test the latest Git commits built as binary packages so that you do not have to get the source code from Git and build it yourself. It's pre-built and available in an ISO that you can test drive in live CD mode, or you could install. So unstable is from Git branches. Testing is from source code tarballs, but from beta versions and RC versions, not only from final release source code tarball versions. And this is from latest released KDE software. Okay, next up, Elementary OS. The focus of this thing was to create a new desktop environment, a new or simplified graphical user interface environment and applications, because GNOME apparently is not simple enough or something. Ubuntu based. Pantheon is the desktop environment's name, based on Debian and Ubuntu. Deb. Okay. Next up, Lite, a Linux Lite, like that. Okay. Based on Ubuntu LTS plus XFCE desktop, targets Windows users. I'm sure it doesn't target Windows users, but that's the marketing line. Okay, Deb. I'm not sure why I would use this instead of Xubuntu, which is the Ubuntu XFCE edition. Okay. But then maybe there's people that, I don't know, will install a very different Linux operating system just because the installer ISO contains a script that, I don't know, changes the background wallpaper every 3 days. For a very simple feature, maybe people prefer one Linux operating system to another. Mageia. So this is one of the bigger Linux operating systems of the year 2000, which is Mandrake. Not one of the 4 most popular Linux OS families. Uses RPM and DNF. Technologically, it's somewhat similar to Fedora, but not really Fedora. It's a continuation of Mandrake and with its ideas. Vanilla OS. I wouldn't know how to describe Vanilla OS. It's Ubuntu, it's GNOME, it's immutable, it's, I don't know, many things. Not really released, so I'm not sure why it would be popular. I have never used. For security and forensics tools, there's plenty of tutorials on the internet which tell you how to access your neighbor's wireless network. All of those tutorials use Kali Linux, so there's all sorts of people that do not know how to use Linux and start with Kali Linux. I'm not sure why. But this is not for people that do not know how to use Linux. Okay, FreeBSD, the first operating system that doesn't use the Linux kernel. FreeBSD uses the FreeBSD kernel and base and a ports collection. So this is a BSD operating system, Berkeley software distribution. Jolitz 386 BSD, and then the public releases from Berkeley, UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, that theoretically do not contain Unix copyrighted source code. So net/2 4.4 BSD-lite 2, 4.4 BSD-lite. Nix OS, the most different Linux operating system so far. There are no /bin/sbin/lib. Nix package manager, everything revolves around this thing, the Nix package manager. Packages are isolated in different directories. Reproducible systems. You can have a single configuration file that recreates your operating system from scratch with all of your customizations. Okay. Next up, Sparky Linux. Says based on Debian Poland. Have never used, I'm not sure what this thing is. Contains all of the possible desktop environments. Next up, PC Linux OS. This is the work of is correlated with a person. Okay, uses RPM and APT. So APT RPM, which is a combination of using the RPM extension, file extension, but then being managed with apt, which is the package manager from the Debian family. I have never used Puppy, Cache, Solus, Arco, Tuxedo. Alpine is a non-GNU operating system that's Linux operating system. So can be extremely small because it uses the BusyBox executable, which is a small executable that can act as bash, as ls, as cd, as a ton of executables on the system. And this executable is even smaller if built not with GNU C library, but with Muscle, which is a C library that's alternative to GNU C library. Okay, this is used in routers, firewalls, containers, and is the base for an operating system that's geared towards mobile phones and tablets. Alma Linux is a binary, is a Linux distribution that's very similar to RHEL, so the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Dev1 is Debian without systemd. Ubuntu is Ubuntu ISO, but not with GNOME shell, but with KD Plasma 5 instead. This is what I use. I've always used Ubuntu since it appeared. Peppermint, I'm not sure what this thing is. Spiral, Bodhi, Smart, GNOPix, nope. Slackware, one of the original Linux operating systems, along with SLS, soft landing systems, and SUSE. Correlated with a person, Patrick Folkerding. What OS, BlendOS, Rhino. Rhino is a rolling Ubuntu. KAOS is correlated with a person, a Dutch person. Bluestar, I'm not sure. GhostBSD is a downstream of FreeBSD, probably, so also not using the Linux kernel, but more geared to desktop users in the sense that it has an ISO with an installer that installs desktop environments, whereas FreeBSD, its installer by default only gets you the X server and an X terminal and an X window manager. Very simple one. OpenMandriva from the family of Mandrake, which was the most important desktop Linux operating system of the year 2000. You actually paid for this thing. Ubuntu with a desktop environment that's named LXD or LXQt. How could that be? LXQt. So LXQt since the year 2018, and previously it was LXD. Okay, LXQt and LXD is correlated with a person, PCMan. Rocky is a binary alternative to RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. CentOS in the family of Fedora, so a Red Hat Enterprise Linux alternative. Gentoo, its own family. Usually you build this thing from scratch. Each time you have the new update of Firefox, you need to actually build from source the entire Firefox source code tarball. But now it has binary packages like the other Linux operating systems and FreeBSD and other operating systems. Pure OS, Clear. Clear was the Intel Linux operating system. Ubuntu is Ubuntu but with XFCE. Arch is a family of Linux operating systems, one of the big four. It contains two things: a large list of package descriptions and a repository of such packages that are not part of the official Linux Arch Linux distribution. So AUR is the repository of additional package build files, and package build is the format that's used by Arch Linux. Some call package build the simplest format to create packages from source binary, from source tarball releases. We can look at such a thing. Polkit. Let's see. And the package build for the package polkit looks like this. So it's similar to a bash script from what I see. There's variables and values, there's lists, some predefined variable names. This is architecture, not Arch Linux. This is the URL that you want to download. So https://download.kd.org/table. This package base is this thing, polkit-qt-1, and then polkit-qt-1 and 0.200.0 and tar.xz, and there's two files in here, the file with extension tar.xz and the file with extension tar.xz.sig, which is the digital signature of the first one. This is the SHA-256 sum. How to build, it uses CMake, so CMake -b, CMake -build. So this thing builds two different packages probably with Qt5 and Qt6. Okay, and this is the way the two packages are created. Says that there's a package named polkit-qt5 that depends on the Arch Linux package qt5-base. And these files that move here, that are copied around, will land into this package. And the same for the package that the files that move here will land into the package polkit-qt6, which depends on the Arch Linux package qt6-base. So indeed, a very clean and simplified recipe for creating a binary package for the Arch Linux distribution from this thing, which is the source code tarball release from, in this example, the KDE community. Okay, ReactOS is an open source implementation of Windows NT. Red Hat, this is REHL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. This is a Russian Linux operating system in the lineage of Mandrake. They like the year 2000 or so. Debian is a desktop environment. Nitrox is a desktop environment. OpenBSD is another kernel, not the FreeBSD one, not the Linux one. Oracle is probably Oracle Unbreakable Linux, which is binary compatible to RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Ubuntu with the desktop environment Mate on top. Void, really interesting. Ubuntu Studio, another ISO with some dev packages from Ubuntu. So the last ones that we're going to look at are Void, which uses the Linux kernel, but there's the package manager called XBPS. And this was the one that uses the BSD base user land, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. And the last one is the one specific for mobile phones, which is PMOS, not in the top 100. Post-market OS. Linux plus, so similar to Alpine Linux, in the family of Alpine Linux, probably a downstream of Alpine, but with additional hardware enablement specific for mobile phones and tablets. And they have a list of hardware that Postmarket OS runs on. Which devices run Postmarket OS? And the support is very varying from one hardware to the other. On some of these mobile phones, the operating system just boots to a TTI, to a virtual terminal, whatever, to a text mode. On some it shows graphical user interface, on some it can make phone calls, on some the camera works, etc. That's why they have this matrix with hardware and features supported. So this was it. This was how to use DistroWatch.com and a summary of some of the many Linux operating systems, and not only Linux operating systems, other open source operating systems that are presented in DistroWatch.com. I searched on Google, Wiki Linux families, takes us to Wikipedia and the list of Linux distributions. In here it shows the main family, so Debian based, Ubuntu based, Pacman based, which means Arch, and Fedora based and openSUSE based. And a bit of short text about many of the possible Linux operating systems. And this huge thing, which is a possible timeline how a Linux distribution was created starting from another Linux distribution. This is the family of Slackware. This is the family of Debian. How do we zoom a bit in here? Where exactly is Ubuntu here? In here. So this parent of this rectangle in this graph is Ubuntu and ends here. Whereas this rectangle is Debian. Okay, so the Red Hat, which I call the Fedora family, because Fedora is the upstream to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Many so-called independent that were created from scratch or from Linux from scratch or from a developer that started building a Linux distribution for private use. Arch Linux started out of nowhere and has this line in here which takes you to Crux. Wow, Crux takes you to scratch, Linux from scratch. So this is it. This is the timeline of Linux operating systems. The timeline is not so strict as you can see it in here. So take this timeline with a grain of salt. Some of these things are useful, some of these are just pedagogical, some of these are outright not accurate. Thank you.